So almost all mental illness has demonstrations that are adaptive in some circumstances and maladaptive in other circumstances. So all our different psychic qualities, being outgoing or introverted, being agreeable or being disagreeable, being conscientious or not being conscientious, they have various degrees of adaptiveness to a situation or maladaptiveness. Like in some situations, you're better served by being more assertive and by being more outgoing. In other situations, you're better served by being quiet and retiring. In some circumstances, you are very served by being highly conscientious. In other circumstances, being highly conscientious will be maladaptive because you won't be able to rest and relax. So those mental health characteristics that help you to survive and to propagate your offspring, those are adaptive, and you spread those to future generations. So during the early part of the 20th century, or much of the 20th century, these biological theories became linked to reactionary political thought and the Nazi movement, and they were stigmatized. And so associating eugenic thought with the Nazi movement and the Holocaust, destroyed the cultural viability of biological thinking about human behavior, essentially from the 1930s to the 1960s. This is what Alan V. Horowitz writes. So during the 1930s to the 60s, organic genetic explanations largely dropped out of the intellectual landscape for accounting for how should we then live. And there was this one other point I wanted to make about this philosophy of how should we then live. So it's a worthy question, and I'm certainly interested in it, but there's another question which is equally important, frequently more important than how should we then live, and that is the question, how do we live? How do people operate? It's great to talk about how people should live and should operate and should behave and should speak, but first you have to start with, how do people actually work? Like, what are the facts on the ground? What's the reality of human nature? Like, how much are we genetically predisposed? How much does environment affect us? Like, how do people tend to react to cues and to stimuli? So first we have to understand reality before we can make any substantial difference with trying to adapt or shape reality in a more pleasing direction.